our first session up today, first session ever. We've got Scottish Rural University College discussing how they transformed services under COVID and delivered lots of benefits. So I'm hoping Kirsten joins us. Thanks, Esther, for sharing the video, sharing your screen. So if you just want to bring that one up, I'm just going to double check.
So I mean, it's fine. I can make a start whilst Kirsten's making her way to the stage. So my name's Esther Gunn-Stewart. I know there's quite a few familiar faces in the room, but for anybody that that doesn't know me, I've been working with the public sector for almost 20 years, and my background is primarily within customer services. I was the head of customer and digital at North Ayrshire Council, and for the last couple of years I've actually been working as an independent consultant. And this year I've been supporting a range of different organisations to continue to deliver their transformation programmes during, I think, what's been totally unprecedented times for all of us. So I'm going to do a wee bit of scene setting, and then I'm going to ask Kirsten Black, who's the registrar for the Scottish Rural University, to give us a bit of a customer view of that. We cast our minds back to where we were at the beginning of the year, sort of February, March time. I was working with Kirsten's team. They had been undergoing a restructure where they'd had a reduction in staff of around about 25% within the registrar's area. And what that meant was, like a lot of organisations, they had less resource available to deliver the service. And also, like many organisations, they'd already done the restructure and reduced the headcount, and then we're starting to think, how are we going to make these changes? So we'd had a project kickoff exercise in February 2020, and really we were just starting to begin the project when we went into national lockdown on the 23rd of March. So cue a frantic call to Kirsten to say, what do you want to do? Do you want to put it on hold? Do you want to still go ahead? And I can't see, is Kirsten up on the stage?
Talk to her in the chat and
all right, okay, right, that's fine. I'll just keep going, and I can always just bring Kirsten in later. All right, no bother. So what we had kind of agreed was, because the lockdown looked like it wasn't going to be something that would be over quickly, although I don't think anybody thought it would last quite as long as we expected, we actually decided to just try and go with it. So the kind of key objectives for the project was to try and look at implementing more efficient processes to try and reduce the pressure on the remaining team members. So this project really wasn't about actually delivering savings because the savings that had effectively already been taken out. This was really about time efficiencies, and looking at identifying opportunities to digitise processes to improve the student experience. So there was a number of processes that were really still very paper-based, and was still paper being sent between different offices. So for those of you that don't know the SRUC as an organisation, there were a number of different colleges that have been brought together under the SRUC banner. So they're based across Scotland, everywhere from Aberdeenshire to Ayr, and down to the borders in Dumfries and Galloway. So whilst they had quite manual processes, they tended to be quite resource intensive because they were working in that devolved way. So Kirsten and I had a chat about what the best thing to do was, and on the Friday, Andy provided me with training for the Engage Process Modeler, and by the Tuesday we were running remote workshops. Now, I wouldn't actually recommend that as an approach to anybody because it was massively stressful, but actually it did mean that we were able to keep the project on track and we had an approach that worked really well. So we probably made the workshops smaller than they would be normally, partly because I had never used the software before. I never had somebody to help to facilitate or scribe, and that would probably be one of my recommendations for those of you that are thinking about running remote workshops or are running remote workshops, is to have somebody doing the facilitation and somebody else doing the scribing. So we mapped the as-is process, and it was then circulated for review and discussion. And normally what we found was that we normally needed some sort of follow-up meeting just to make sure that everybody was on the same page. One of the things that was quite clear was across the different campuses, there wasn't any consensus or consistency in relation to processes. Processes had grown up over time, and people did them in the way that they felt most comfortable with. So we were keen to reach a consensus around the as-is process, and we then spent time mapping the 2B process and identifying potential improvements. And some of these improvements were organisational improvements. And I have to say that that's probably one of the, I hate always talking about the benefits of the pandemic, because I think, I mean, you hate to say there's been any benefit, but probably from a project point of view, it did provide opportunities, because there was a number of areas that I think Kirsten and their team were keen to progress, that maybe if they hadn't been in the position that they'd been in with the pandemic, that there would have been some pushback. So examples of that was that every single student had a face-to-face interview. Now, that wasn't the case across other higher education and further education organisation. So that was something that was felt to be quite a big cost, that didn't necessarily add any value, and potentially could actually even be a blocker maybe for some students that didn't perform well at interview. So that kind of thing was an opportunity for us to actually remove those steps and deliver those savings that maybe would have been more difficult had we not been having to operate in a remote way anyway. So these processes were circulated again to all the participants, and we also made sure that we looked at all the key stakeholders. So it wasn't just about the people within the registry team, but also around other administrative support, the academic team, and students. We then drafted up IT requirements and costed them out as to the number of days. The core system is a Capita-based system, so we worked with IT and with Capita to look at completing the development, and that wee diagram at the end is everybody dancing all happy because we've managed to implement the change. So that was the work that we did. All of the work was completed remotely. So whilst I have met some of the team face to face, a lot of the people that I've been working with, it's all really just been done through team sites, through collaboration, using the Engage process modeler. So some of the key process improvements that we were able to implement, and there were sort of trends when we started to look across the processes, that we were able to sort of make the process improvement once and then reuse it across a number of different processes. So one of the things there was around the automation of correspondence. So there was some of the areas used mail merge, others were still doing manual letters. So we were able to automate a lot of that and write rules based around, if you've not heard back from the student within 14 days, send this email. If you've not heard back from the academic team within X number of days, follow this up by sending an internal email. We also worked really hard to standardise the processes, and I think that is probably a journey still that the organisation are on. I think whilst you might get agreement to some things within the workshop, I think the reality of that when it comes to the implementation can be quite different. And I think there are people who still are doing things because that's the way they've always done it, and because there's a nervousness around changing the process, especially when maybe they're working from home, they don't have colleagues to lean on and support. So I think that's something that Kirsten and the team are continuing to work on. There really wasn't a lot of service level agreements, and the impact of that was that when stuff came into registry, they would send it out to the academic team, and for some departments were better than others, some would respond promptly. But for others, stuff would sit on people's desks for ages, and that meant that we couldn't tell the students when they could expect to hear back or when they would get the move to the next stage in the process. But similarly, it meant that the team were spending ages chasing people up, following things up, doing a lot of really like non-value added tasks. And by implementing service level agreements, it meant that we could easily set the expectation with the student as to when they could expect to hear about their places. That stopped them from following things up needlessly, but it also meant that we could escalate things at the right stage within the academic teams. And I'm sure there's a number of organisations that have access databases as an organisation. SRUC were like many others and had a number of access databases, which really for the team, I would say, were a bit like a comfort blanket. So they'd grown up over time because people needed certain reports or they generated letters, but really there was a lot of duplication between what was in the core system and what was in these access databases. And one of the objectives of the project and one of the improvements we were able to deliver was the removal of some of these access databases, streamlining the process, reducing the duplication, and helping to deliver some of those savings. So the outcomes then, if we look at the project outcomes, over the processes that we looked at, we've been able to save more than 5,000 hours of time annually, and that's not just within admin time, but also within the academic team. The number of accuracy applications have gone up because there was quite a lot of paper-based applications. If students were continuing on, they had to fill out an application to say they wanted to continue, and we've been able to automate much of that process, and that's also driven the number of applications that have been received on time. One of the things that we worked on was the internal verification process, and that's reduced the organisational risk through improving compliance to the verification process. And we would expect all of this really to have improved employee and candidate feedback for an employee. From an employee point of view, it's really reduced the number of non-value add steps and improved the process flow, and it's made it much easier for the baby to be able to follow things up and see where each candidate is in the process. From the student or the learner's point of view, some of the processes are really bringing them into the 21st century. Things are much more automated. They're able to get correspondence via email now, and it's much easier for them to track the progress of their application. And finally, we delivered postage costs of more than £3,000 annually through reducing the number of letters that have actually gone out. So I'll just exit out of this. Kirsten, you're here. Apologies. When I was actually speaking, I couldn't actually see if you were here or not. So I suppose I really just wanted to bring you into the conversation. I've probably moved on a wee bit further than I intended to because I was hoping that we would have more of a chat. But I just really wanted to ask from your point of view around the challenges that you faced as an organisation trying to deliver this type of transformation programme during the pandemic.
Yeah, I think there was a few challenges. I think the first challenge was that we were a split new team. So the team was only formed in January. So registry function in itself is a team of about 20 people at SIUC. And we were put together from groups of other people, and there had also been some voluntary redundancies as well. So, colleagues had seen other colleagues leaving. So this new staff brought together this team brought together. We looked at the processes, and we identified, as you know, Esther, with your help, we identified the sort of low hanging fruit, the ones where we thought that we could get. We could get sort of quick wins, I suppose, with we knew we were going to have to spend time, we knew we were going to have to spend money because we knew there were digital solutions, so that we were going to need consultants and so on. But I think people were probably a little bit apprehensive because actually some of the colleagues that needed to work together to get solutions over the line hadn't ever worked together before. So that was, and of course, we'd had a team meeting together in January, and that was like one of our big last days out. So it was so that was an issue. So a split new team working together was part of the issue. I guess there's always sort of concerns, no matter how forward-looking individuals or teams are. There's always a little bit of hesitancy about change, a little bit of concern about change. So we had that as well. And as you said, Esther, SIUC has been in existence since 2012. The 4 constituent colleges that were in existence before that had been in existence for 100 plus years, but coming together as a new team. And there was still sort of 7-8 years on, there was still differences in the way that practices were carried out, and so we needed to move on from that. So there was that. So there was the actual sort of process review, but I think there was quite a lot about winning hearts and minds.
And I suppose that's one of the key things with any improvement project is the technology and the process. It takes a back seat because it's quite often the people, the personalities, and the buy-in that you've got within the organisation that actually determines the success of the project. And I suppose that's one of the things that I think is quite interesting, having worked with the team and what you've actually been able to deliver over the last 6 or 8 months. Is around, some of the barriers. So people would say, oh, well, it's an external supplier, but we've been able to work with Capita and give them the requirements. We've been able to get the improvements delivered. And I think since we started working together in March, you're actually going live with the improvements now. So we've not just written a report saying we want to do, or we've not just said that this is what's possible, but actually we're switching on that functionality to the team and automating the processes. So I think what the team have been able to achieve over the last 6 to 8 months has been absolutely fantastic.
Yeah, no, I totally agree. I think it's been a challenge. I mean, we've got 3 of the projects that we've worked on. So the progressing admissions, the centralisation and digitisation of FE admissions, and the internal verification report, they're at final testing stage. All of those 3 projects are at final testing stage. So it is absolutely fantastic, and I think it's we are the team that are responsible for starting the academic year. We're the team that are responsible for finishing the academic year. It's a split, as I said, it's a split new team. It has been a year to forget in terms of the challenges that we faced. And actually, I think when you're working with a group, and it is constantly challenges and dealing with new problems that we hadn't thought of, actually having some projects that are about achieving and making things better, both for themselves and for those stakeholders that they work with, I think that is hugely helpful, because it is such a massive positive in a fairly sort of stressful environment. And I know that sounds, because we're actually, we've asked colleagues to do more to get these projects over the line, but because they're such positive projects that colleagues can see the wins all around from them, it's hugely helpful. It's quite humbling, actually, to be honest.
And having that sort of time to reflect over the last sort of 8 months, Kirsten, is there anything that you or the team would have done differently, or?
I think that's really difficult to. I think there's one thing I would definitely have done better, and that was I would have communicated better. Not within my own team. I was pretty good at communicating, but with the wider organisation, SIUC, got probably sort of 1,400 employees, 600, 700 people employed within the faculty academic area. And I think sometimes I had my head down so much getting the job done, making sure that we were doing our day job, making sure that we were getting these projects done in an agile way. I sometimes forgot to communicate to the wider stakeholders in as effective way as I could, and I think that would certainly be one thing that I've learned, is the fact that I just need to sort of communicate a bit more routinely about what we're doing and where we are. I sort of salvaged it by doing some sort of meetings during November with faculty management teams, etc., just letting them know what we were doing, and that was good. But I think that was definitely one thing that I learned, was just for me to communicate better. In the heat of the battle, you're just often focused on what we need to do to get things over the line. But I think communication is probably what I would have done a bit better. And I think also sorry, Esther, just the second thing I
No,
was going to say was around the agility, because I think one of the things that I've found is that we've tried to, for most of these, but for all of the projects that you've been involved in, we've worked really agilely, and we've sort of been aiming for as near to perfection as we get. Some of the other projects that we've had running over and above that, so moving everything to an online enrolment, moving everything to an online induction process for our students, we've got about 3,000 students, moving all that to online. Some of the results were not perfection. We were still getting rated maybe 4.2 out of 5 from students in the feedback, but there were things went wrong. And actually, culturally, there's quite an interesting issue there around accepting a job that is not 100%, a job that is 92 or 93%, but does what you need it to do, but you actually manage to get it done in the time. Because, I think at times, and probably all institutions are like that, there's probably a cupboard that nobody talks about, where the projects that were sort of overworked and looking for perfection actually never ended up, hitting live. And for us, this year we have had to hit live, but sometimes the job hasn't been absolutely perfect. Sometimes it's been 92, 93%.
And I suppose there's a couple of important lessons in there, Kirsten, because I think that in any project, quite often the comms is the thing that can sometimes be forgotten about. And I think that this year it's been even more challenging because people are working at such a pace, but also because you're not in the office, there's not that informal communication that there maybe is in other times. And I think the example that you gave at the end there is also really important. I think particularly within the public sector, quite often it's been just good enough, and actually doing something and getting that incremental change is actually better than the aiming for perfection. Because even if you think you've got perfection, as soon as you press the go live, somebody will go, oh, I wouldn't have done it like that. Or something will happen from a user point of view that you think, actually, we could have done that differently. And I think that does fit in with the whole agile principles around the minimum viable product. Right, what I'm going to do is I'm going to go back into the team. I'm just going to give you a very quick sort of 5-minute group exercise to get you to test the various different types of functionality on the table. So what we'd like you to do is on your tables, just very quickly talk around your experience of the last 8 months. How has your transformation or change programs had to change or adapt? And we're looking for just one example within the chat to be shared from each table. So literally 5 minutes, and then we've got Broxburn who are coming on next, who have got a really, Kirsten's talked a wee bit around what they've managed to do at a sort of fair amount of pace within the SRUC. And I have to say, it's often one of my frustrations in working with the public sector, and anybody that works with me will know that, as I get frustrated with the pace that things happen.